الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with الروض المربع, and hopefully inshallah ta'ala we can finish this fasl and then we resume after Ramadan inshallah. So he says here ويسن لإمام التخفيف مع الائتمام. This is continuing with the أحكام, the rulings of al-imama, or the status of the ma'mum with the imam. So here ويسن, it's recommended لإمام, for an imam, التخفيف. التخفيف is to make things light. That means not to make the salah too long. It's recommended for the imam not to make the salah long, مع الائتمام, with being completing the salah. So التخفيف is a relative thing. What is light, what is short versus long? We have, of course, the way of the Prophet ﷺ is the criteria to know what is light and what is short and what is long in the salah, with the fard salah. And as it's going to be mentioned in the sharh, inshallah ta'ala. But the takhfif has to be, of course, with completing the salah, not to make it short in a way that would undermine the perfection and completing the salah. He says لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا صلى أحدكم بالناس فليخفف. Because of the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, if one of you صلى أحدكم بالناس, if one of you prayed بالناس, that means he led the people in the salah, فليخفف. So this is a command from the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, فليخفف. So let him make it light, don't make it a long salah. قال في المبدع ومعناه أن يقتصر على أدنى الكمال من التسبيح وسائر أجزاء الصلاة. The meaning of فليخفف, this is now, what is the meaning of to make the salah light? أن يقتصر على أدنى الكمال. That he would just, الاقتصار is that you don't go beyond. القصر is when you shorten the salah, right? يقتصر, to make it short or to make it only, على أدنى الكمال, to fulfill the minimum completion and perfection of the salah. We talked about أدنى الكمال before. If you remember, when you say that the tasbih in ruku' and sujood, if you make one tasbihah, this is the minimum requirement for the ruku' to be valid, with also the other condition that the person is in the state of ruku' with every joint stopped moving. But as far as to say the tasbih, one is the mandatory as far as the fard. But adna al-kamal 3. Adna al-kamal 3 times. So this is the adna is the least of al-kamal. Al-kamal is the perfection. More than that, mashallah, is good. But the minimum of what is perfect is 3. So أن يقتصر على أدنى الكمال, that he keep it on the أدنى الكمال, like for example من التسبيح, the 3 تسبيحات, وسائر أجزاء الصلاة, and the rest of the parts of the salah. إلا, so this is التخفيف. This is the least what is mentioned about short, or making the salah short and not long for the imam. Nothing less than that. This is where he cannot go less than that. لا يجوز له أن يخفف أدنى من ذلك. هذا أدنى التخفيف. This is the least of the تخفيف. But then إلا أن يؤثر المأموم التطويل. Unless the مأموم يؤثر, he would choose otherwise for the imam to make تطويل. التطويل is the opposite of the تخفيف, and that is to make the salah long. وعددهم ينحصر, and their number ينحصر is contained, meaning the numbers of the ma'mum. So if the ma'mumin, they like for the imam to make the salah long, and they're kind of contained, not in a masjid where it's in a place where people are come and go, in their public place, very wide open place, or even by a train station, or by places where the ma'mumin are not all known every time. So there's always no people for every salah. But if they're masjid, as they say, even mention some of the books of the fiqh, the masajid by the homes, by the streets where it's not too busy and things like this, usually the musallin are the same ones. They come on a daily basis, and they like for the imam to make the salah long. So then the matter is according to what they want. And the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, this is what the original الأصل في صلاة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كما جاء أنه يدخل في الصلاة يحب أن يطيل. That the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he would enter the salah and he would love to make the salah long, but he would make it short عليه الصلاة والسلام because of بكاء الصبي, a child crying, and he would feel for the mother of the child, so, but the norm is that he would like عليه الصلاة والسلام to make the salah long. So إلا أن يؤثر المأموم التطويل, or it's a masjid that is known that they make the salah long, so nobody will have a mistake to go to that particular masjid or so. وعددهم, and the number ينحصر. وهو عام في كل الصلوات. This is general in all of the صلوات. مع أنه سبق أنه يستحب أن يقرأ في الفجر بطوال المفصل وتكره سرعة, even though it's been mentioned before that it's مستحب, it's recommended to recite in Surah Al-Fajr بطوال المفصل. طوال المفصل, the long surahs of al-Mufassal, and then Mufassal starts with Surah Qaf. So that or the like of it. وتكره سرعة تمنع المأموم فعل ما يسن. تكره, it's makruh for the Imam سرعة. السرعة is to be in haste or to do quickly in such a way تمنع المأموم فعل ما يسن. The Imam is, if he's making the salah fast, in a way that the ma'mum would not be able to do the recommended acts. ما يسن. So ما يسن, for example, the ma'mum wants to say things after coming up from the ruku', the extra tasbihat, some dua in the ruku', dua in the sujood, all of that is recommended as mentioned before. Reciting Surah Al-Fatiha and a surah, for example, in Salat al-Dhuhr and the Asr, the first 2 rak'ah, this is all mustahab. So the Imam should not be fast in such a way that he prevents the ma'mum, the follower, from doing the recommended acts in the salah. So this is وتكره سرعة تمنع المأموم فعل ما يسن. And كما سبق, يعني التخفيف والتطويل, this is a relative thing, and the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام used to pray, and those who are behind the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام used to be the ضعيف, the weak, and the old, and the al-haja. So all kinds of people would pray behind the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. So that's why when people are in dispute whether the Imam is praying long or short, then the way to judge this is the way of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. What's the norm? The norm is that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, as mentioned before, Salatul Fajr, he would recite in the like of 60 verses. This is the norm. And Tawal Mufassal from Qaf and the like of Surah Qaf. In Salatul Dhuhr and Salatul Asr, Awasat al-Mufassal. From عما يتساءلون till Surah Al-Duha, this type of length of the recitation. And Maghrib from Qisar al-Mufassal, from Al-Duha till the end, short surahs. And Al-Isha from Awasat al-Mufassal, also عما يتساءلون, or before that, the surahs of Juz' Tabarak. So this is all the norm. If once in a while the Imam makes it long, then this is also something that the Prophet ﷺ would do with the conditions that are mentioned. And as from Salaf, when someone would make 10 tasbihat, 10 tasbihat in the ruku' and the sujood, and this was the closest to the way the Prophet ﷺ. But again, the general rule here, وَيُسَنُّ لِإِمَامٍ التَّخْفِيفُ مَعَ الِائْتِمَامِ. So التخفيف while making sure that the salah is complete. Then he says, وَيُسَنُّ تَطْوِيلُ الرَّكْعَةِ الْأُولَى أَكْثَرَ مِنَ الثَّانِيَةِ. وَيُسَنُّ, it's recommended, تطويل is to make longer the first rak'ah more than الثانية, more than the second one. This is the sunnah, this is what is recommended. لقول أبي قتادة, because the statement of أبي قتادة, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يطول في الركعة الأولى, متفق عليه. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم used to make the first rak'ah longer. And this is if the 2 rak'ahs short surahs, it's not really one would be longer than the other. But if he's reciting long recitation, then it becomes very clear. And that's why even like Ibn al-Qayyim and others, when they mentioned these types of things, it's not too much recognized if the surahs are short, but it's recognized when the recitation is long. But in general, he would make the first rak'ah longer than the second rak'ah. إلا في صلاة خوف في الوجه الثاني, unless it's like the Salatul Khawf in the wajh الثاني as described, where there are more than one way for people to make Salatul Khawf in war. So one of which is that the second rak'ah will be longer than the first rak'ah, because the imam, he would lead the people, the first group, and then when they would be with him in the first rak'ah, and the second group are guarding them. And then in the second rak'ah, he will make the second rak'ah long, so that the people behind him, and those who first group prayed with him the first rak'ah, they would depart with their intentions, and they would finish their salah, and he's still standing in the second rak'ah, and they make salam, and then they leave, and the other group will come in their place and stand and say Allahu Akbar. To them is the first rak'ah, and the imam still standing all of this in the second rak'ah. And the first group will go in front and guard. So this is a case where the second rak'ah is longer than the first rak'ah. So he's just mentioning that as an example. وَيَسِيرٍ كَسَبِّحْ وَالْغَشِي. Yasir, that means the second rak'ah is longer, sometimes with something very insignificant, very small, like سبح اسم ربك الأعلى والغشي. Salatul Jumu'ah, al-Ghashay is a little bit longer than سبح اسم ربك الأعلى, even though the Prophet ﷺ, he would make سبح اسم ربك الأعلى recited in the first rak'ah, and al-Ghashay in the second rak'ah. So this is الزيادة اليسيرة لا ينطبق عليها مثل هذا الحكم. So السنة الاستحباب هنا, the small differences, one surah or some verses a little bit longer than other verses, does not apply here. It's only that has to be some significant differences between the first and the second rak'ah, and then in that case to make the longer one in the first rak'ah. Then he says وَيُسْتَحَبُّ لِلْإِمَامِ انتظار داخل إن لم يشق على مأموم. ويستحب للإمام, it's recommended for the imam, انتظار داخل, to wait for داخل. داخل is اسم فاعل, the one that is entering the masjid or entering the musalla. انتظار داخل إن لم يشق على مأموم, unless it's not too difficult for the مأموم. So this is, the imam is in the salah and he hears someone entering the masjid. It says here يستحب, it's recommended for the imam to wait, so that that person that is coming late, to make it for the salah, to make it for the rak'ah, to make it for the ruku'. If he's in ruku', to wait longer till he joins the salah. And there's some athar, but mainly when the imam is standing. As some of the hadith were describing the prayer of the Prophet ﷺ, that he would wait ﷺ in the salah, in the rak'ah, till there's no sound of people walking. So the first rak'ah in Salatul Dhuhr, for example, it takes a longer time. Usually people come in the first rak'ah. So like, for example, here the door opens, the door closes. So he would make the salah till there's no sound anymore. No sound of people walking, meaning the first rak'ah. But with the condition, إِن لَمْ يَشُقَّ عَلَى مَأْمُوم, unless it's not too difficult for the ma'mum. Otherwise, this can keep coming and happening the entire salah. So the imam should recognize the ma'mum first, as he says here in the sharh. What's the priority is for who now? For the one that didn't join the salah yet, or the ma'mum that is in the salah? The ma'mum has a priority here. Why? لأن حرمة الذي معه أعظم من حرمة الذي لم يدخل معه. Al-Hurma is the sanctuary, is the sanctity. What sanctuary? Protection? The place. So the sanctity. So the sanctity of those who are with him, meaning the ma'mum, a'zam, is greater than the sanctity of the ones that are not with him. So when the imam is leading the salah, the ma'mum, he's leading the ma'mum. He's not leading the people in the parking lot. He's leading those who are with him in the salah. So they have rights on him more than those who did not join the salah yet. So he should not make it difficult for them. ويستحب للإمام انتظار داخل إن لم يشق على مأموم لأن حرمة الذي معه أعظم من حرمة الذي لم يدخل معه. ثم يقول وإذا استأذنت المرأة, now if the woman takes permission, الحرة أو الأمة, free women or not, إلى المسجد, took a permission to go to the masjid, كره منعها, it's disliked to prevent her. It's disliked to prevent the woman from going to the masjid. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله وبيوتهن خير لهن وليخرجن تفلات. رواه أحمد وأبو داود. Because the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said لا تمنعوا إماء الله, do not prevent, do not deprive the women مساجد الله, the houses of Allah. وَبُيُوتُهُنَّ خَيْرٌ لَهُنَّ. Their homes are better than them, better for them, meaning to make salah in the home. Of course, this is the general rule that the salah for women in their homes is much more in rewards. But he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, do not prevent them if they want to come to the masjid. وَلْيَخْرُجْنَ تَفِلَاتٍ. And let them, meaning the women, if they come to the masjid, that they go out from their homes tafilat. And tafilat meanings غير متطيبات, not having perfume, not adorning themselves. So to observe the hijab and not to adorn themselves in any way or form. رواه أحمد وأبو داود. He says, وتخرج غير مطيبة, and she goes out without طيب, without perfume on, of course. ولا لابسة ثياب زينة, and not wearing a garment that is adornment in itself. You know, at their time, they would never imagine a woman would go out متبرجة or showing her what's supposed to be covered. So they would talk about the outside garment itself. You know, they're all covered, but saying ولا لابسة ثياب زينة. The garment that she's wearing is not adorning it in itself that attract the eyes of others. وبيتها خير لها, and her home is better than for her. لما تقدم, for what has been mentioned before. And of course, as then he says, ولأب ثم أخ ونحوه منع موليته من الخروج إن خشي فتنة أو ضررا ومن الانفراد. For a father, then a brother, ونحوه, and the like of him. Or, of course, if it's the husband, منع موليته, that means المولية means she's under his guardianship. So he has the right to prevent her from going in خشية فتنة, if he's afraid of fitna, something harm might happen to her, or mixing, for example, between men and women, whether it's the fitna to do with sins, أو ضررا, or harm. Maybe, you know, that if she goes out alone and harm might happen, things like this. So he's the one that's supposed to be in charge. He knows. The man's supposed to be more knowledgeable of what's harmful out there. And he's more aware of things. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made men to be the protectors for women. وَمِنَ الْإِنْفِرَادِ, and also al-infirad. Al-infirad is to prevent her from being alone. Living alone in a house or whatever. He also had the rights to prevent her from doing that because of maybe the harm that he might see that can be there harmful for her. So this is mentioned here with part of what's mentioned about the salah in the masjid. So this is the last part of this chapter, and then after that it's going to talk about في أحكام الإمامة, the rulings of al-imam. But we'll leave that inshallah ta'ala till next time. But everything is clear? Is the previous so we finished with this one inshallah, and from the previous one, the issue of سبق المأموم وتخلف المأموم. Hopefully everybody went through this. Anything that is not clear in that. So now we're done now. So if there's any questions, please go ahead inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.